I want to talk about, you know, the lemons in your life. You've already touched on quite a few. And I think you and I are going to have many opportunities to talk and to share, because your life is just, it's so rich. It's so deep. And life has handed you many lemons, um, to say the least. But one of the things you're talking about in terms of your daughter is it's it's our challenges that make us resilient, that make us who we are. And many would say, you know, what I'm really hearing there is it's our scars who make us who we are. And you took that very literally. So why don't you, can you take us back to April, I believe it was 2003, where you actually faced one of the biggest challenges anyone can face, which is death.
Yeah.
And tell us about that day.
What a blessing it was to experience that.
I can't
And
believe you just opened with that sentence. What a blessing it was to experience that.
and
Like,
I mean that. And I mean that. I mean, I can say that now because I sat through all the storms.
oh,
And what do they tell us to do when there is advisories that there is some storm that is coming through? Go in your house and hunker down and just ride it out. And let's just hope that when it passes, we're still there, right?
yeah.
And for me, I can say that it was a blessing now because I hunkered down and I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was happening in the world, but I just had to find ways to be connected to myself and be intimate with myself. And when people think of intimacy, right, it's immediately you think of, oh, with somebody else. And no, I had to learn how to be intimate with myself, with my
Yeah.
feelings, with my emotions, with my thoughts. I had to figure out how to have a relationship with that.
Hmm.
But to the date that you're referring to, April 5th, 2003, I was 19 years old. I was in Iraq. I was at war. And this was 6 months after I joined the United States Army.
And can I ask, when you joined, had you considered that you might be deployed? Like, what were your
So
feelings about that?
yeah, so I knew that, I knew that war, as I always like to say, I believe that war was a possibility. I just never thought it would be my reality because I was 19 years old, right? And I believe nothing's going to happen. I'm incredibly naive and no, nothing's going to happen to me.
Right.
And, so I sort of had this, and of course in basic training, our drill sergeants would, talk to us and say, hey, this is what war is like, and this is what you should be prepared for because you will be. And it's just like, okay,
Mhm.
right? It's almost equivalent to when you're a child and your parent is telling you, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen.
Right.
And then you still go and try it yourself. And then you're like, oh, damn, they were right. That did happen. So there was rumors around it. And then because we already had troops in Afghanistan when I joined in September of 2012. I mean,
Right.
2002, sorry.
Yeah. I was like, wait, how did we get to
Yeah,
2012? Yeah.
I just joined.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 2002 is when I joined. So we already had troops in Afghanistan. So I knew that there was a possibility I was going to war, whether it was going to be Iraq or Afghanistan. So 6 months after I joined, I'm now at war. 6 months. And less than a month into my deployment, into being in Iraq, the Humvee that I was driving ran over a roadside bomb. And the front left tire ran over this landmine. It exploded. There were three other guys in the truck with me. They were thrown out of the vehicle, but they all walked away with minor physical injuries. And I say that, because it's important to highlight that they physically didn't have scars, but they emotionally and mentally did, that surrounded that day. But I was trapped inside.
Wow.
And for 5 minutes, this Humvee was engulfed in flames. And finally, after 5 minutes, I was pulled out and it started the medevac process. They put me into a medical induced coma because there were a couple of reasons related to that. One, my body was going through a level of shock, so I didn't feel any pain. I was numb, but I was still very much alert. And I would fight off everybody and tell
Mm.
everybody, I'm fine. Let me go back. I'm fine. clearly I was not.
Wow.
So what they did is like, one, let's sedate him to preserve this energy because he'll need
Of
it
course.
if he survives, because they weren't sure if I was going to survive. And then
Mhm.
two, he by putting him in a coma, it's going to grant us the ability to do what we need to do to give him a chance, because him fighting us is getting in the way of us doing what we need to do.
Sure.
So I went to Germany and then in the back up in the United States, and I ended up going to the burn center for the military, which is in San Antonio, Texas. And 3 weeks later, I came out of my coma. I was brought out of my medical induced coma to my reality, to my new normal. And I tell you what, the challenging part about that, Kaley, was in my young and my very short career in the Army, I learned about something and I fell in love with something. And what that was is I fell in love with service. My purpose was to serve.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that. And so my thought process was, when I joined the Army, I'm only going to do 3 years and then I'll move on with my life. But once I started to taste this, and once I started falling in love with this, I thought, well, I think I want to do this as long as they allow me, which in
Wow.
many cases is 20 years. So
Wow.
when I fast forward now, I'm in the hospital. I asked them, how are the guys that were in the Humvee? Because that's instilled in you when you're in the military. It's not just about you. It's about the team. How are they doing? And when can I go back? And
Wow.
I was told, well, we don't know, one, how they're doing. But two, you're not going to be able to go back. You're
Oh,
not going to be able to remain in the Army. And what was so difficult about that was that within the first few days of coming out of this coma, my identities were stripped away from me.
yeah.
The identity that I was starting to create for myself of being in this uniform, of being of service, and that was my purpose, I couldn't do that anymore. And then the identity of physically what I looked like for 19 years of my life now suddenly was
Yeah.
gone. It wasn't there.